Hey everybody, welcome back to another SAT review session. Let's get to it. So we are going to be looking at the very first practice test from the SAT's website, where you can find that. Our group calls it Practice Test Julie, but a better name, simpler name probably would be just Practice Test 1. If you go to College Board's website, you can actually see the full URL here, but if you just Google College Board Practice SATs, it'll take you pretty much right to here. It's the college readiness part of the College Board's website. Anyway, just search for Practice SATs, Math, Navigate. Here, you can also just, like I said, copy that link. So, SAT online practice tests. If you just scroll down, you'll see Practice Test 1 here. This is the one that we're going to be working on today. And you probably would want to download both the Practice Test 1, which is right here, and also the answer key, which is the third thing down. You can look at the essay, and some of these other things are fun, but it's really the first and the third things that you need. So here is the answer key. You also should go to our website, pjtestprep.com, and if you haven't already, get yourself a goal sheet. Some of you who have been in our classes before may already have a goal sheet. That's fine, you can use that one. But right here it says download our SAT and ACT goal sheet. This is a very important part of the process because basically test prep and score improvement really always needs three parts. It needs past, present, and future. First part of your journey to a higher score is going to be looking at how it's gone before. You should always start, and I'll pause you guys at the beginning of each section and give you a minute to look at your previous attempts on your goal sheet or wherever you've done practice tests, homework, drills, isolated questions, whatever, and be always thinking about as you go into any new practice section, okay, what do I stink at? What have I had trouble with in the past? What's gotten by me? What things do I want to remember? So that's the first thing, to prime your brain to get ready. You'll do that on the actual SAT testing as well, where before each section you'll try to think about that. So where we start is to be thinking about where we've come from and what our goals will be as we move into the second section, which is a series of practice drills. We're going to do one for the reading, one for the writing, one for the math today. As with these videos always, you can skip around if you just want to focus on math. Skip to that part in the video, but this intro part is helpful as well. You'll say, for instance, all right, my goal is to get a 600 in the verbal section. And so in order to get a 600, I need to be getting about 75% of the questions right, which means I can miss about a quarter of them, which would mean that if we were going to do 20 questions, and we're not going to do 20 today, we're just going to do a set of 10. So divide this in half. You can miss 2.5 or so questions, 2 or 3 of them. That would get me on pace for 600. If I'm able to keep that pace up, I should be able to get there. You'll then write down what section we're going to do and how many you're hoping to miss in this particular section. And then, of course, afterwards, record what actually happened. So that's the middle stage. After you've reviewed what happened before last time, do a section. And then in part 3, you're going to say, all right, so darn, I was hoping to get only 2 or 3 questions wrong. I missed 4. Boy, I had a little bit of a bad day. What was it? And in each section, we'll talk about how you can learn from that. But the most important overall note is to write down a note or 2 about what happened, what you can learn from that, spend the time. We will go over not all of the answer choices, but some of them from each section, maybe half of them in this section for the reading that we're going to do first. And great news, the SAT has provided you, along with the answers, explanations for everything. Now, sometimes their explanations are a little mechanical. They don't always explain them in, common English and teach you sort of tricks and stuff, but they are relatively thorough, so that can hopefully help you understand why you missed a question. And I'll try to expound and give you some better answers for that. Okay, so past, present, future. Let's look at the past, and this is the first stage of this, guys. I want you to take a minute, pause the video if you need to, review what you've done on the past reading sections, because that's the first section we're going to dive into. We're also going to be doing the last practice passage in this practice test 1 on your SAT. It's here on what would be page 16 in this PDF about space mining, the next gold rush. It's actually a paired passage. If you want to do a single passage, our first SAT practice review section, had one that was more of a single story passage. This one's more of a fact passage and is a paired passage, so that adds a little extra wrinkle to it. But this will be good practice. Think about how you've done these in the past. And overall, remember the 3 kind of intro steps to the reading is, first, you're going to read the darn thing. So do whatever you got to do, mark it up. I'll do some little bit of that afterwards. I'll let you try on your own. But underline things, circle things, write notes in the margins. Always start with the intro text. This one doesn't say a lot, but it does give you the titles at least, which sometimes can be helpful. So space mining, the next gold rush, is going to be the first passage. When you're doing a paired passage, my advice is to read just passage 1 first, and then see if there's any questions you can do from just passage 1, and there are a few. Then, once you've wrapped those questions up, come back to passage 2, do that one and the questions about passage 2 only next, and then at the end, we'll do the ones about both. That has the effect of breaking it up a little bit, saving you from having to read so much at once and get confused by stuff in the other passage. Like, if one of the trap answers is from passage 2, but you've only read passage 1, you can't get tricked by that. So that helps us as well on these particular passages. So that's step 1. Step 2 will be the questions. Think about the questions. I highly recommend on the SAT, even more so than on the ACT, to predict the kind of answer you'd like to see. Think about the thing you want and put it in your own words, and then find the answer that best matches that. And then the third step, of course, is to kill all the wrong answers and find the right one, which sometimes you can just skip right to finding the correct answer. Other times you might need to knock a few out and narrow it down. Okay, so that is our review. Let's let you guys take a shot at this particular passage. Again, this is on practice test 1 from the College Board's website. You can also find the same test on Khan Academy. I can email you the test. If I've sent it to you, it's probably called Practice Test Julie. And we're going to read this passage. I want you to do questions 42 through 52. You should have about 13 minutes to do this if you're going to try to get through all 4. If you're not going to try to get through all 5. Wow, how many passages there are. If you're not going to try to do all 5 and you're just going to slow down and do 4, you could get a little bit more time. But set a timer, and when you're ready, go ahead and do your best on this passage, and then we'll go over it. Good luck. Okay, so let's take some notes about what's going on here. I think I'm actually going to do this. Children, this is how they are right now. I'm going to cheat a little because my handwriting is terrible, as you know, and we'll see, and make my notes in just a Word document on the side. You'd just be doing the same thing with a pencil, writing this down. But let's say that we read passage 1. And we determined that the main idea of this passage was, and again, keep this super duper simple. Basically, the idea of this is, oh, we're gonna mine stuff from space. Yay! I can't even type. Yay, that's amazing. We're gonna go up into space and we're gonna mine for gold and yttrium and all kinds of crazy cool stuff, and it's going to be awesome. And there's a lot of details that I can't remember, but basically we're going to mine stuff in space. Okay, so before we even get to passage 2, we should try to tackle a few of these questions that are just about passage 1. So 42, for instance, starts right off just saying the author mentions several companies primarily in order to well, why does the author do this? This is what we call a function question. Anytime they're like, put yourself in the author's head. Why did author do this? What was his or her goal in mentioning these different companies? And this is where prediction is so important, because these answer choices are tricky. The SAT is a very tricky test. They have to make it really hard so that the average person gets half the questions wrong. And since they're not hiding the passage from you, it's right there, they have to word these so confusingly that it's very difficult to get them right. The best way around that is to think in your own words about the answer. So why does the author mention several companies? Now, they do give us a broad set of lines here. I could also scan for the capital letters because we've got to name these companies. Let's review that part. We know that this is about mining stuff from space. But this paragraph, maybe I reread this, and you do have time on the SAT. It's not as fast as the ACT is. So form comes hot on the heels of this thing unveiling 2 private asteroid mining firms Planetary Resources in Washington says it will launch its first prospecting telescopes in 2 years. So that they're going to shoot telescopes into space to like spot where the gold's at. Then we got this Deep Space Industries in Virginia hopes to be harvesting metals from asteroids by 2020. These people are going to go up and get some iron from a big floating rock in space. Another commercial venture sprung up in 2012, Golden Spike Color will be offering trips to the moon, including to potential lunar miners. Okay, so that's even beyond mining a little bit, although it does say that they're going to be, that's like a mode of transportation where lunar miners could get up to the moon to blow it up or whatever. Anyway, okay, so what do all these have in common? Why is this guy saying this? Well, obviously, it's not just one person who's stoked about space mining. A bunch of companies want to get involved. All of these, at least indirectly, have to do with actual mining, as opposed to just joyrides in space. So maybe it's about mining, but basically, lots of companies wanted like get on board with this mine stuff from space mission that they got. So let's look through our answer choices here. Let's do, I can just do cross-offs right here in Excel or in Acrobat. So the first answer choice, note the technological advances that make space mining possible. This one's a little problematic right off the bat because of this. My technological advances is not really what they were talking about in these passages. I'm going to have to get this open the PDF because you're not going to cross this stuff off. All right, fine. We'll do that. Pardon the delay. Let's bring this one down. No, I won't be starting any free trials. All right, so let's do it this way. Technological advances, as we said, is a never said that. Possibly one of those hint at that, but they're not noting them. Noting would require that you're writing them down. So let's not go with that. Provide evidence of the growing interest in space mining. Okay, I'm sort of into that one. It does talk about how these companies are interested in it. Emphasize the large profits. Couple of different, what we call two extreme answers here. And remember, guys, your three main eliminators in this section are too extreme, like they're just focusing way too much on something past what they actually stated. Never said that, which is what happened here. They didn't really say that stuff there. Or out of scope is the third one, where they're saying, you know, what's from paragraph 2 and then it's from paragraph 5, or what's the main idea and then they give you a detail, or what's this detail and then they give you an idea. So this, they're not even talking about the large profits. They didn't give any dollar figures or anything. And emphasize, no, they're not emphasizing the large profits. They're just saying people want to do it. Now, D is also kind of tempting. Highlight the diverse ways to carry out space mining operations. I was actually drawn to this answer when I first looked at it. It does sort of refer to the ways that you might carry out space mining operations. And I guess you could say it's highlighting them. There is one problem with this, though, the word diverse. Now, yeah, sure, you're probably going to have to come up with lots of different solutions for how to do this. But they didn't mention lots of different solutions. They just mentioned that these companies want to do it. And I suppose space miners getting to go up on moon trips, fine, but diversity would require more than one solution to things. And so this is kind of the word that makes it a little bit problematic. Now, let's say that you don't agree. Let's say you're like, I think D works. I like D, and I disagree with your argument about why it's wrong. Okay, let's say we're stuck between B and D then. I would ask you, is there anything you can find wrong with B? Well, no, it's not that I don't like B. I also think D is fine. Well, the SAT is a stupid test because both these answers are right. Well, D is not right, as some of the details we caught about, but let's pretend that you don't want to agree to that. Here's your tiebreaker. Guys, in this section, always err on the side of the more general answer. If you ever have a choice between, you know, the best event that Susie ever attended in her life or an event, the more general an event is always going to be right because the other thing is a subset of that. Even if we are highlighting the diverse ways to carry out space mining operations, in order to do that, don't these companies have to be just generally interested in space mining? How can B ever be wrong, especially if D is right? So you can't have any of this other stuff without general interest. So err on the side of the more general answer, and that will help you. Even if you don't really know what the answer is, make a better guess. And ultimately, who cares if you were confident? As long as you picked B and got it right, you'll be okay. All right, let's try 43. Note how detailed they get sometimes on these. The author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effect? And you're probably thinking, man, I don't remember. I know they were all stoked about it, but that sounds like a lot of details that am I going to have to scan this entire passage again? Maybe. But remember that the SAT likes to try to help you out to keep you from having to do really nitpicky stuff like that. So before you just go scanning, you should always keep your eyes on the bigger picture of things. And remember that one new test question format they have is this double set. These ones where they say in 44, which provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question. Oh, I don't have to scan the whole passage. I only have to scan these 4 lines. And then I figure out which one is a positive effect. It's very wise to sometimes do these paired questions backwards. So let's try that on this one. We're going to actually start with 44. What you do have to do, though, is keep this part in mind. We need one of these lines to talk about a positive effect. And then once we've found one, we will figure out which positive effect that is. So let's go to lines 18 through 22. 18 says, within a few decades, these firms may be meeting earthly demands for precious metals such as platinum and gold, and rare earth elements vital for personal electronics like yttrium and lanthanum. Sorry. Chemistry. Okay, that actually does sound good. I kind of think that is a positive thing. So are there any of these answer choices that sound that? To rephrase it in my own words, we're going to find a lot of cool metals that people want. So yield materials important to Earth's economy. Yeah, they didn't specifically say the word economy, but I mean, electronics are bought and sold. That's in the economy, and gold is obviously part of the economy. So this seems pretty strong, this connection here between A and A. And in fact, these will be the right answers. But let's say you don't know that. You're just like, okay, yeah, those are in the running. Let's look through the others and we can eliminate them. 24 through 28 discusses that they also hope to build an off-planetary economy free of any bonds with Earth in which the materials extracted and processed from the moon and asteroids are delivered for space-based projects. I guess that sounds sort of positive, but isn't that really more neutral? I mean, what if you don't want them to be doing any mining in space? Like maybe economy free of any bonds with Earth is actually a problematic thing and it's going to cause a war. That is a little bit more neutral. It's not such a positive thing. And more importantly, is it any of these positive things? It's not raising the value of precious metals. I don't think they even said that at all. So just don't like the unanticipated technological innovations. I don't remember them saying anything of that. This doesn't support any. So actually my argument about why it's positive or not, maybe that's a little bit more subjective and you don't like that, but it doesn't support any of these previous answers. I'll sometimes do stuff where we even draw little arrows from here to there and say, this just doesn't even, you know, versus this one did support that. That was a good connector right there. So those two are connected. Anyway, feel free to draw in whatever format makes most sense to you. 29 to 30. In this scenario, water mined from other worlds could become most desired commodity. No, that's not a good thing. That actually almost sounds like you're going to fight over water. So again, positive, and none of these talked about water at all. So we can eliminate that. And then we have companies and machinery, something about 41. Are also eyeing this stuff. No, this is just neutral again. It's saying what they want to do. So one argument might be that these three answer choices all just, none of these agree with the idea of a positive effect. Also, the fact that none of them really support these others eliminates all of them. And in order for any of these to be right, they have to be supported by something. So consider And in a moment, we'll do one where we aren't going to do it backwards. So it is up to you, but I think a question like this might be well worth your time to reverse it. Okay, let's do one more from passage 1. These questions are called vocab and context, and they are some of the easiest questions on the test if you do them right. As it is used in line 19, demands most nearly means, now cover your hand over the answer choices. Do not look at them yet. I don't want you to get trapped by these. What you want to do is go find the word demands in line 19, which is right here. And I want you to scribble this word out. Just scribble it all the way out in your booklet and say, what would I put there? Even if I can't think of a synonym, what's like a group of words that would mean that? So we actually just read this sentence. Within a few decades, these firms may be meeting earthly blank for precious materials, such as platinum and gold and other stuff that people want for electronics. So meeting earthly, demands is a pretty good word there. But if I had to use a different word, earthly, people want to get it. That's super vernacular and not even a synonym, but it's just people want to get gold, people want to get yttrium, they want to use that stuff on Earth, so they want it. So let's just find a word that means like they want it. Offers, no. Claims, inquiry, no. Desires, obviously. So if you can make a good prediction about what you're looking for, these can go very fast and can be very easy. Okay. If you haven't read passage 2 yet, let's review that. And in a moment, we will turn to a couple of other questions. So let's do the ones in between. And then we're going to look at question 49, 50, and 51 in just a second. Probably skip 52. Okay, I'm going to skip the passage 2 only questions for now because I want to get to a couple of these joint ones, which can be some of the trickier questions on the whole test. They require a little bit more thinking. So let's look at 49, which is a super, super common question. You'll almost always see a question like this in any paired passage, which basically just says, which statement best describes the relationship between the two passages? Now, had we gone through passage 2, we would have written something for that one like, after passage 1 is like, yes, space mining, woo! Passage 2 is like, whoa, whoa. Slow down here. Let's take it easy. Let's plan this out. Because if we just go flying off into space, we're going to have a Wild West out there, just like we did during the original gold rush. And we need to, like, think about it. Not saying we can't do it. Not saying that, there isn't really cool stuff to be mined in space, but it's a little more cautious approach. And so if you're able to do that, obviously you would have answered a few questions about passage 2 first, but once you come to these joint questions, open that relationship back up and say, all right, my prediction for 49 is something like passage 1 is super gung-ho and passage 2 is like, let's be a little more cautious here. So they're not fully disagreeing with each other. This is way too much. So 2 refutes would make that too extreme. Illustrates the phenomenon in more general terms. Now, I did say I like general answers, but that is way too generic and has nothing to do with the prediction that I made. Argues against the practicality of the proposals put forth in passage 1, maybe. And passage 2 expresses reservations about the developments discussed in passage 1. So these both seem like they could maybe work. This one, well, they're not really more extreme, I suppose. This one talks about reservations, which actually is pretty good, about the developments discussed in passage 1. So that's actually not that specific. It's just saying, I have some reservations. Not saying we're not going to do it. I just, don't know that we want to go on vacation to the middle of a volcano. So D might work. And if you're thinking of leaning towards D, the more important question probably then is, well, why is C wrong? Argues against the practicality of the proposals. The key word is here. Practicality means, can we actually do them? Is this practical? Like, I'm an evil villain and I have a scheme, I'm going to steal all the world's mail. Well, that would probably cause some problems, but like, are you all the world's mail? Like, you know how much mail that is? How are you going to get all that mail? What are you, Santa Claus in reverse or something? You're going to freeze time and go around the world and fill up an endless sack? Like, let's just, hijack a nuclear missile or something like we always do. This is a problematic thing here because that's not the problems that passage 2 had. It just said that I mean, we got to put some rules in place. Remember, we said plan it out. It didn't say don't do it. I don't think it's possible. It just said let's do it, but let's plan it out first. So this is going to be your best answer here. D, keep that in mind as you are attacking these. Author of passage 2 would most likely respond to the discussion of the future of space mining in lines 28 or 18 through 28, passage 1, by claiming such a future. These questions are so hard if you don't think about them first. You really have no other option then, unless you're such a good reader that you already kind of had thought about this and you already knew it. But we need to really slow down here, and we need to put ourselves in multiple different people's heads on a question like this. So passage 2 is the whoa, let's take it easy person. And those lines in 18 or in passage 1, 18 through 28, oh, those are the ones we read about. Oh, wait, no, never mind. That's the passage that comes afterwards. Within a few decades, these firms may be getting lots of stuff, but like the gold rush pioneers who transformed the Western United States, they won't just enrich themselves. They're going to have an economy free of any bonds with Earth, and they're going to do all this other grandiose stuff. You can just picture this more cynical, more cautious, probably a better word for it, author of passage 2 being like, slow down there, Bucky. Like, where are we going to really do all this stuff so fast? Like, just calm, slow your roll here, bud. So how would they respond? They'd be saying that such a future, it's not impossible, but like, can we get some rules going here? Can we plan this out? Is inconsistent with the sustainable use of no, never said it was anything about sustainable resources. Will be difficult to bring about in the absence of regulations. Ooh, they do like rules, like kind of like that. That's a plus there. We also have cannot be attained without technologies that do not yet exist. Never said that either. This is probably true. I mean, why aren't we doing it right now? Well, because we don't have enough technology, but passage 2 never said that. Seems certain to affect Earth's economy in a negative way. That seems awfully strong. It's more like, let's just take it slow and go with the rules. Now, I glossed over this, but this is also part of a paired passage. This paired passage could also be done backwards like we did that previous one. This one, though, I think might be more likely to be able to be done forward. Not as in you should do it that way, but the other one was probably way better to do backwards. This one maybe could go either way. It's up to you. You got to get used to these paired questions and figure out the best way for you to attack them. A good reason to do this one backwards might be, I was kind of assuming that you remembered that the author didn't say certain things in paragraph 2. But if you don't remember any of that, because you didn't read passage 2 very well, you might need to go and see which of these things he did or didn't say, in which case doing that backwards would be good. This does go a little faster if we already answered B to this, in which case we can ask to answer something, well, we can look for an answer that talks about the lack of rules. So 60 and 74 are the first two answers. 60 says, part of this is about principles. Some will argue that the magnificent desolation is not ours to despoil. This sounds like a moral argument, which doesn't really address any of the choices in the previous question. There's also the emerging off-world economy to consider. The resources are valuable, maybe very different. And then questions about stewardship and legality. I don't know that that really hits any of these either, any of these choices here. No, even it's closest to D, but the negative way seems certain to affect. That sounds like very extreme wording there. Certain, negative, and so forth. We also have answered line numbers 81, and then 85 will be the last. So let's just read this last part. One speaker concluded that regulations should be avoided. I don't think they said that. The miners have much to gain. Here it is, though. Without consensus, claims will be disputed, investments risky, and the gains made insecure. It is of our long-term interest to seek one out. So this really summarizes the author's view. In case, by the way, backtracking a little bit, if you had trouble understanding passage 2's argument, always read the first sentence and the last sentence of the essay and maybe the first sentences of each essay. But this guy isn't saying we shouldn't do this. He's just saying we got to make a plan first. So this very well supports this answer B for a nice pairing. You could have done it backwards as well. It's just practice and understanding how these work. But if you do a few of these passages, you'll just see it's the same couple types of questions over and over and over again. It is helpful if you're good at reading. If you're not good at reading, develop your reading skills. And I don't mean like I can read a junior high level book. I mean, I can read a passage like this and discern the main idea of the passage without having to reread it 19 times. If you're not good at that, it's okay, guys. Just practice. People get discouraged like, oh, I'm in high school and I'm not like, I don't love reading. I'm not saying you have to love it. I'm not even saying you have to be the best reader like in your class or anything. But remember, human brains are extremely good at learning things. You used to not be able to read at all. You used to not even know your alphabet, but then you learned it, and then you learned how to read, and then you could read basic books, and then you learned how to read better. It's just practice. If you play a sport, at some point you weren't very good at that sport, at least not as good as you are now. How did you get better? You got coaching like this, but mostly you just played it a bunch and practiced. You can become a great reader. You don't have to be a top 1 percentile reader in the world. You don't have to be an editor for the New Yorker or something. You just need to read at a college level, which is very attainable for almost everybody. You just have to keep doing it. So if that's what's getting in your way, it is a little bit of a longer term fix, but read a lot over these coming months and then turn to the next steps of the SATs reading section, which are a little bit more self-explanatory. Okay, let's move on. I want to do a little bit on the writing section as well. This section weights a little bit less, so we'll spend a little less time on it. But let's take a look at the very first passage, the last one in the reading and the first one in the writing, so makes sense, right? Anyway, we're going to do questions 1 through 11. And again, to review, we first want to go to our goal sheet, where we're going to use the same verbal goal and the same percentages will roughly apply. If you want to get, let's say, a 500, you'll need to get about 50% of these right, which means out of 20, you could get 10 of them wrong and still get a 500. We're going to do 10 or 11 actually. So you should be getting about probably 5 or 6 of these right in order to attain a 500. If you want to get a 600, you could probably only miss 2 to 3. If you miss one of them out of 10, you'll be getting on pace for 700, etc. We're going to do questions 1 through 11, so mark that down here. Now, this is the part where you prepare. I want you to take a minute, pause, and look back at the last time you did a section 2 writing passage, or the last couple times. What were you good at? More importantly, what did you struggle with? Are you always missing assignment questions? We're going to see one of those in a minute, a couple of them. Are you bad with connector questions? Do you have trouble with apostrophes, keeping things short? Remember, brevity, shortness is the good tiebreaker. But you want to first go to the past, mark all this down, think about it, pause if you need to, before we turn to the present, where we're going to give you guys a practice section here. So once you have prepared, we are going to give you guys, let's see, we've got 35 minutes to do 4 passages. So 35 is about 36 minutes. Divide that by 4. You have just under 9 minutes to do this passage. So set a timer. You can just Google timer or use a phone. Not a caveman. You have a phone with a timer on it. Find something, set it for 9 minutes. Go ahead and complete this first passage. All right, now that you've unpaused your video, let's talk about the passage called Way to Go. Oh boy, they're puns. Oh no. Normally they're very nice about kind of telling you the main idea of these in the, in the title. Sometimes they cannot resist throwing an egregious pun on there, whatever, forget it. So this is about Greek yogurt. One interesting thing about this passage is they actually go a whole, like, almost 2 paragraphs before they even give you a question. But yes, you should still read it because you are going to get asked both in assignment questions, obviously, and also in some grammar questions what this was about. So we've got Greek yogurt. It's gaining popularity. It's really blown up recently. And it has forced those involved to address the detrimental effects of the yogurt making process may be having on the environment. Oh, good. Fortunately, though, we're steer negative, but now we're using the transition word to come back positive again. Farmers and others in the Greek yogurt business have found many methods of controlling and eliminating most environmental threats. Given these solutions, as well as many health benefits, the advantages of Greek yogurts outdo the potential drawbacks of the production. All right, so I always recommend on any grammar question that you might have missed, so maybe you got this right. Again, you can always skip through some of these explanations if you're like, yeah, one was super easy, I got that right immediately. But this is what we would call a word choice question. If you did get it wrong or you were a little iffy, maybe you write that down. And of word choices is actually kind of vocab based. So I apologize on behalf of the SAT if you just didn't know this word, but words aren't that complicated, so maybe that's your fault. I would just say for word choice, especially vocab ones, we do something called make your own sentence. So in case you were like not sure about which one to pick here, the advantages are going against the drawbacks. I don't like the word drawbacks. I've never seen that. So let's talk about advantages of, I don't know, buying a horse are better than the disadvantages of buying a horse. So I think I'm going to buy a horse because the advantages blank the disadvantages. Do they outperform them or defeat them? I guess that means that advantages are bigger and better than the disadvantages, but those would require these things to be actors that are, you know, fighting each other and doing better in a show. So that's not really the best way to refer to advantages being better. Outweighing could be good because weighing is how much something weighs. So like, oh, here are the pros and they knock the scale down a lot, and then the cons, you know, it's like that. Okay, that would be pretty good. Outdo is going to be the same problem that those others had. You can't, a thing can't outdo another thing unless it's a robot or a, you know, or a horse, I suppose. Outweigh would be better there. So that's a word choice question. Make your own sentence. Just become more familiar. All right, then we get into a discussion of the issues with the environmental problems with Greek yogurt. So the main problem is it creates acid whey. Because it requires lots more milk, it produces lots more acid whey, which is hard to get rid of. To address this problem, they found a number of uses for acid whey. You can add it to livestock feed as a protein supplement, and people can make their own Greek-style yogurt at home by straining regular yogurt. Okay, this seems problematic because we're veering into something that's sort of unrelated to the problem of getting rid of this acid whey. Also, it's kind of a positive thing. Aren't we supposed to be talking about farmers have found a number of uses for acid whey? This is not a use of acid whey. Neither is this. And this is not a use of acid whey either. D is a little bit more tempting, but this is just saying why you'd give this stuff to the cows. So it's like a added bonus. The key here is really this: number of uses. Number of uses implies more than one use. And we've talked about one. You can give it to livestock. The other thing you can do with it is convert it into a gas. It's really this word uses right here that makes B the only possible answer, because these others are just saying something that isn't really another use for it. It's a side benefit or something else you can do. So pick that one, just like D here. Let's take a look at the next one. Number 3 rather, is just a pretty straight up grammar question. This is actually just going to have to do with apostrophes, really. No, that's not how we use waterways. Remember, possessives use apostrophes usually, although there and you know, whose are exceptions. You also would use them for water is, but that's not happening in either of these cases. So we're looking at this acid whey runoff can pollute waterways, depleting the oxygen, or could have polluted waterways. Even if you were not sure about the verb usage here, the way it's written is just shorter, so that might be a reason to pick that one. This one's pretty straightforward. Most of you, I'm sure, got it right, so I won't spend a lot of time, but err on the side of shorter, watch your apostrophes, and make sure that it If it just read pretty well the first time through, maybe there isn't a fix there. If it sounded horrific the first time you read it through, maybe you're less likely to lean towards no change. Here we have just a good old-fashioned connector question. So if you missed this, you would write down connector here in the margin. I don't want to do that. So let's see here. Next, we've got just a situation where they're listing yogurt manufacturers, number 1, food scientists, and number 3, government officials. Those are just 3 people. Guys, this is just a list. We don't need excessive commas here like these got. And so we don't want to pick that one. Just a regular old Oxford comma here will make C a pretty strong answer. All right, and for number 5, we have another assignment question. This is what we call a placement question. These can be some of the trickiest ones on the test. They're making you take sentence 5, which is this one, and they're trying to tell you it should go maybe somewhere else, although option A is to leave it where it is. These are tricky because, first of all, assuming it's not in the right place already, it kind of gums up your understanding of the paragraph. But you can still hopefully use most of the other sentences to get the general idea. This is a good place to restate what we've been talking about. The main environmental problem caused is the creation of whey, and it's hard to get rid of this stuff, but they found 2 solutions, and later they're saying these people are working to get rid of more. So this sentence, what is this about? If it's properly introduced into the environment, it can pollute waterways and do bad stuff. Oh, so this is a bad thing. You might put a little negative mark over here. And if we're talking about this problem, but then the solutions, we already turned the corner into the good things. So I don't want this sentence here. I'm going to stay away from putting it where it is now and having it come so late in the paragraph. I actually don't think it's going to be this one either, because after sentence 3, this is where we turn the corner. To address the problem, they found a number of uses for it. And so, because it requires up to 4 times as much milk, it's got a lot of acid, which is difficult to dispose of. Here is a natural conclusion to that. If it's introduced improperly into the environment, it can cause these issues. So that would be a good place for it after sentence 2. You have to think bigger here. You have to think context. And that's one thing that can be tricky about the grammar section of the SAT. And that's, although they're testing your grammar like 75% of the time, there are, especially on assignment questions and sometimes on connectors and word choice questions, they make you think a little bit bigger. Okay, so if you want, the explanations, as again, are always here in the answer explanation sheet for the test. In fact, forgive me if I didn't say this already, but when you are going over your test, which you should be doing at the end of each one, maybe even before my explanations, is just come to this section and check, and then return to your goal sheet and then write down how it went. So you'll know, oh shoot, I was trying to miss 2, but I actually missed 3. I was trying to miss 1, but I actually missed 2. Let me take some notes. Listen to my notes, my suggestions on these, or someone else can help you, perhaps even the answers as well. Oops, sorry about that. And great. Okay, let's give yourself a quick break if you need one before we delve into the math. All right, and finally, let's talk about some math. So first, as always, make sure that you are heading to your goal sheet. This time, record your math goal and figure out how many you can miss. I'm going to give you guys an option depending on how much practice you think you need and how much time you have. We're going to look at section 4. This is the calculator math section. If you'd like to practice the section 3, head to our other SAT practice video and the number 1 practice review session where we do a section 3. In this case, we're going to do either all of or half of a section 4. So if you only have a shorter amount of time or you just want to do straight up 20 questions, do just 20, or I guess you would probably do 19 out of the 38 questions of section 4 here in practice test Julie, aka practice test 1 from the College Board's website. Remember that the math goes from easy to hard, although it does reset at the grid ends, and that's not always exactly a perfect curve. But if you struggle with math and you're only going to do half, I would do maybe a couple of the first easy grid-ins, but then more or less questions like 1 through 19. If you are trying to challenge yourself and do the harder ones, certainly doing the questions in the 30s and the late 20s would be really good for more difficult questions and maybe the last couple grid-ins. But I'll leave it up to you if you want to do half of them or just do the whole entire section. And if you are going to do half, which 20 you want to do. As always, make sure to mine your previous math attempts to see where you've been strong and weak, what concepts you want at the tip of your mind as you go into the section, what strategies do you want to remember to do. There are some problems in the section where you can make up numbers or steal numbers or estimate or eyeball, and we'll review a couple of those, but keep those strategies in mind too. So step one, the past, review where you have messed up in the first place. If you need to pause this video now and do that, make sure you're coming into the section with a strong sense of what you want to focus on. Part two will be the present, where we're going to actually do a section and keep these goals in mind. Write those down here on this chart. And then when you're ready, we're going to have you do, from practice test 1, the entire 38 question set here in 55 minutes, or you can do just half of it in 22 and a half minutes. So make your decision. When you're ready, go ahead and complete that, and then unpause the video when you're ready for a review. Okay, so welcome back. Good job, guys, on that practice set there. First thing you want to do is head to, on the website, the answer key right here. Go ahead and grade those. If you need to stop the video again so you can record how it actually went. Did you hit your goal? Did you not hit your goal? How did it go? No matter what, unless you got every single problem right and fully confidently so, there's probably still a little bit to learn. So let's review a handful of questions here. I'm going to focus more on some of the medium and harder ones, since the easier ones, hopefully the explanation set is a little bit better for those. Again, the explanation set often gives a pretty thorough mathematical answer. Sometimes it's not the best way to do it. Sometimes it's not even very helpful. It's very difficult to understand. So I'll try to, give them a little bit more fun explanation of the ones that I'm going to go over. But you can read any explanation you want for these. And just hopefully it'll be sort of self-explanatory when you get to question 1, although my God, that's a lot of explanation. In any case, let's go over a few of these questions. I'm going to just skip the first 15 and, well, let's start on 15. How about that one? 15 and 16 are part of a data set. I wanted to include one data set explanation in here because they are a decently sizable portion of section 4. You do not get that many data questions on section 3. But because of that, you get more of them on section 4, and so those are kind of critical to understand. This one also overlaps with algebra a bit, which is why I especially like it. It'll help us review both the idea of understanding algebra and also a graph and also dealing with a chart. So the first rule of chart problems, do not kill yourself over this chart. Just get the basic idea of it. You can read the directions if you want, but a lot of times, well, there's not very many of them. A lot of times you can figure that out from the picture. So the total cost of renting a boat by the hour, if you were to rent it for 0 hours or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours, the cost in dollars would be increasingly expensive, as you might guess. Now, it's a relatively cheap boat to rent. I assume we're not talking about a yacht here. This is maybe a paddle boat or something. Even to get it for 5 hours only costs 20 bucks. Now, we're going to see something interesting that happens with this origin point. So I won't explain that now. But if you do notice things like, oh, that's weird, even if you didn't even use it at all, it would still cost you 5 bucks. Those kinds of observations sometimes just make things go a little bit faster. So let's dive into the first question. Again, it just tells you C is the cost in dollars and H is the cost in hours, or the number of time in hours. So what does C represent? No, wrong. What does the C intercept represent? So let's have a look at that. We have C, the intercept is what happens when you intercept the C axis, which is this axis here. So this is the intercept. If you wanted to put that in terms of points, it would be 0 hours leads to $5. Well, what does that mean? What do you mean? You're going to charge me $5 for walking by the boat corral and looking at them? No, they're saying that, like, no matter what, even if you took the thing out for 30 seconds and then decided you're afraid of the water, you still got to pay them $5. So that is going to be the initial cost of renting the boat. Not the number of boats rented or the number of hours the boat's rented for. That's what H is. And the increase each additional hour, that would be how much you're going up. Go over 1 hour. Looks like that's 3. But we'll get to that in a second. 15, not super hard. Maybe the easiest one we're going to do today. I will note also that even though 15 is not that young in terms of numbers, sometimes when you get a multi-part problem, the first one is like a little easier than you'd expect for that part of the test, and then the second or third one are increasingly difficult. Sometimes if we had 15, 16, and 17, 16 would be about a medium level of difficulty, 15 would be more like an easy one, and 17 might be quite hard, even though it's 17 and not 27. So do keep that in mind, and 16 will get harder. So do know that these are increasingly difficult, even within subsets. Now, for question 16, what is the relationship between H and C? This asks you to take this information and make an equation out of it, which for some people is kind of challenging. So if that does give you the heebie-jeebies, here is another strategy you can do, which is a version of the strategy steal numbers. Remember that steal numbers just means take some information from someplace, like in the answer choices, although we can't on this because those are all equations, or a piece of information here. Like the point, the note that we marked a minute ago, that at 0 for H, you're still going to have to pay $5. So if we plugged in 0 here, 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 the answer needs, oh, actually, sorry, for this last one, it would be over here. Then the other side, C, needs to come up to be 5. Well, it's not going to work with this one or that one. The only two answer choices that would work will be those two. Now I've muddied up my markings a little bit, so let me erase these. That also is consistent with the algebraic line that is shifted up 5. Now, what slope does it have? That's what the other question they're asking is, rather, how much does it increase for each additional dollar? Now, you got to be careful here because this graph doesn't look very steep, so you might think it's not such a steep slope, but you got to be aware of the axes. Notice that this goes up by 2, by 4. This one takes all this distance to get up by 4. So this graph's a little bit distorted. It's actually way steeper than it looks. Regardless, you probably should just say for each additional hour that we go over, you know, or that we rented for, we actually have gone up $1, $2, $3. So that's where this 3 is coming from, and the correct answer of C. Be careful of that. If you missed that and you got B, that might just because you eyeballed the graph. I love eyeballing. But we do got to be careful that we have an accurate graph. It didn't say it's not drawn to scale. It is drawn to scale. It's just not drawn to the same XY scale, which can distort the graph a little bit. Okay, let's skip a few problems and head to 19, which is another opportunity for steal numbers. Now, this problem also could be done with a system of equations. So if each salad costs $6.50, this is supposed to be an S. And if each one of those is $6.50 and you added that to each drink, which costs $2, that a little harder there, that should add up to the total amount of $836.50. Racking it in, dude. But that's not the only equation. You'll need another one as well. They say that the number of salads and drinks combined, just to make sure we're reading that right. Yes, 209 salads and drinks are total sold. We now have a system of equations that we could solve. You probably would want to rewrite this a little more neatly in your own writing and then solve it out. That is the algebraic way. The other way that you can do this is to try the steal numbers way. Again, notice that when your answer choices are all numbers, you can kind of plug those in. What we would do is just select an answer choice, usually one of the middle ones. I'm going to try C. Pretend that 99 is the number of salads that I have. Now, it probably isn't. it probably is a different one. It's got a 75% chance of being that, although I kind of don't like A because 77 is really far from all the other choices. But if I just said for a second that maybe it's 99 salads, if I've got 209 salads and drinks together, that would mean I would have to have exactly 110 drinks in order for this to add up to 109, or 209 rather. And if you're like freaking out on the math, just use your calculator. This is going to get multiplied by 2. This is going to get excuse me, that's wrong. This is going to get multiplied by 2. This one's going to get multiplied by 650, or 6.5. And I will use my calculator for most of this. I'll take 99 times 650. That's going to yield 643.50 plus 220 nets me something that's too high. It's 800 and looks like 63.50, which, you know, I'm doing that in my head a little bit, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for 36. To me, and actually it got a little, wow. Just to make sure, let's plug this in with some new bookwork that I'll do very quickly here. 93 times 6.5 equals, whoa, whoops. That's what happens when you mash your buttons wrong. 93 times 6.5, thank you, is 604 over here. And then we have 116 times 2, which is going to, of course, be 132. And you might be seeing 0.0. This is going to work out. Oh, sorry, 232. My goodness, I am tired today. 36.5. Either way, that's just proof that it works. Do you need to recheck that? Like if you're pretty sure it's not A and you know it's not C and D, if you got time issues, I mean, just crank it through. Just push B, circle this problem, you know, to review more later or something. But if you think you got it, you may not need to double check. Okay, let's move on to number 24, which is, looks like an algebra problem. It's actually a geometry problem, though. These problems are sort of annoying. Every once in a while, the SAT breaks its own rule about not including formulas or not requiring you to know formulas that aren't just there in the formula bank. The main offender of this is the circle formula, where they kind of need you to know the circle formula on this test, like maybe once per test. But when a center is at 0, 4, that means that your x doesn't shift at all, as none of these do. But your y is going to shift, you'd think up 4, but it's actually minus 4 because everything is backwards inside parentheses. So it's either going to be A or C just right off the bat. The radius has an end point. So if our circle is at, where can I draw this that I won't do it my own way? 0, 4, so let's say the center's right here, and the radius has an endpoint of, let's make this kind of big actually. That's 1, that's 2. 4/3 is basically here. Then you're supposed to go up 5. Should have drawn that even bigger here, but let's zoom in a little. So this length is 4/3 or 1.3, and this is just simply 1, and this is our circle apparently. This is just a triangle distance formula problem. And I'm actually going to do a clever cheat here to convert this into 3/3. Because I don't know if you remember your Pythagorean triples, but if this is 4 something and this is 3 something, then this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. Of course, all of these is divided by 3. That's still the same. So 5/3 is your radius, and you're supposed to square that in order to get the other side. So it's not going to be 5/3 or 25/9, or excuse me, it is going to be 25/9. It's not going to be either of these. So I think my work, oh yeah, that worked nicely. Great. So we want one of the answers with 25/3, and we needed one with the -4, which is why the answer is A. The basic circle formula is always, guys, just x squared plus y squared plus r squared, not r, but r squared. And then if you have any shifts, you throw them into parentheses like this. That is a math concept that people forget because you probably haven't done that since early algebra 2. The SAT is not going to ask that a lot, but in a lot of tests these days, they do throw 1, maybe even 2 in like that. So that might be a concept just to refresh. All right, let's move forward again to 28, which gives people tricks. It's not that hard exactly, but it screws people up because they don't read it quite correctly. So let's look at what it says here. We're going to need to do a little bit more graphing. And here we've got this system of inequality, which is y is greater than x plus 2 equals 1. Well, you could do a little t-chart here if you wanted and just say if x was 0, then y would be 1. If x was 1, then y would be 3. Basically, it's a graph that starts shifted up 1, and it's got a relatively steep slope on it. And y is bigger. So when you do a inequality where y is bigger, you're going to shade the higher side. You could also just plug the origin in 0, 0 and see that, wait, that doesn't work. 0 is not bigger than 1, so it's not the side with the origin on it, it's the other side. Let's switch colors here because we have to do another one. Let's do something where things combine nicely. How about red and blue making blue? The other graph has got a lesser slope, but a downshift of 1. So this one's going to look a little something like this. Once again, we're shading the high side because it's y is bigger than. So here we shade this. Now, you got to be really careful with this. I want you to notice that this area right here, bounded by these 2 lines, everything over here is just blue only. And to contrast with that, down here, this area is red only. Then we have an area where we've got both red and green, or excuse me, both red and blue. And as we know from our second grade art class, red plus blue makes psych purple. You're all wrong. You thought it was that, but I was trolling all of you. This is purple is what that is. So that area is purple, and that's actually the region we care about because a solution to the system means something that solves both parts of the system. So the solution is this purple region here, not the blue, not the red, the purple. And as we can see, that obviously covers all of quadrant 2, but it also gets up into quadrant 1 here, and it gets down into quadrant 3, but it never touches quadrant 4, which is going to be our answer. So in order to be a solution or a system to the solution, it has to solve them both. If they asked which of the regions contains no solutions to either of the 2 inequalities, then you'd have answer choice D because there would be solutions in all 4, but you got to watch out for that track. I've had a lot of people get that wrong. And finally, let's finish with number 30. I want to just do this one because it's supposedly the hardest one in the set. I feel bad for making fun of green now. We'll use green. So which of the following is an equivalent form in which the coordinates of vertex A can be identified as constants in the equation? Okay, this looks hard as hell, and that's why it's located so late in the test. This problem, if you just look at it in the right way, is weirdly easy. Now, I bring it up to show you that way in case you ever get this problem again. You can make quick work of it, but also just as a strategy reminder that yes, it supposedly goes easy to hard. And in fact, the way that they determine what should be question 1 and what should be question 15 and what should be question 30, although, you know, these SAT math writers are pretty smart, they kind of know which problems are easy, medium, and hard. The only real way to tell is to give it to a bunch of kids and let them determine for you. So what they do is, like on the PSAT a couple of years ago, this problem probably appeared. And oh man, only like 30% of kids out of 10,000 kids got it right. Whereas the question that was number 1 at the beginning of this set, 90% or 95% of them got that one right, and 15 was somewhere in the middle, maybe 60 to 70% of them got it right. So that helps them determine. This one was incorrectly answered by so many people, mostly because they freaked out when they saw it and they didn't know what to do. But let's look at what they're actually asking here. Which of the following is an equivalent form of the equation in which, or from which, the coordinates of vertex A, so right here, can be identified as constants in the equation? Well, what is A? I mean, A obviously looks like it's over 1. And then it actually, by the curvature of this, I think it comes down a little lower than -15. So I would guess like -16. The vertex A is at the point 1, -16. And I want the vertex A to be identified by constants, aka real numbers. Which one of these has got a -16 and a 1 in it? Wait, D. That's the only one that's even remotely close. That's all you have to do on this one. Yeah, sure, there's a more complicated explanation if you convert the standard form into the vertex form, but why? You don't need to know any of that stuff on this one. It's hard because it looked hard. It's not hard because it was hard. Sometimes you overthink it. Take a look at these late problems, and I guess what my strategy advice here is, even if you aren't going to do the late ones, just take a quick glance at any of them with any extra time you have and see if maybe there's one here you can pick up because they made an error and accidentally made the answer choices too easy. The problem itself, the math way, is kind of hard, but the strategy way is not always. Also, a reminder to use your strategy. Sometimes you can take, theoretically, the hardest problem on the test and knock it down a bunch of pegs. Frankly, I don't think 30 really is the hardest problem on this test by any stretch of the imagination, but it's positioned like it is, so get it right. It's worth the same as everything else. Okay, so if you haven't already done so, go ahead and mark up your sheet, your review sheet here. It's on page blah, 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 on the SAT goal sheet, and record. Spend a few minutes here after the session, or just right now if you want to pause it, marking up on your sheet what things you want to remember for next time, because this is going to sound more philosophical than I really mean it to, but this session's future is next session's past. So remember, step 3 of this session's process becomes what you then will review next session in order to remember better. Okay, I'm not really going to say anything about the essay because it is optional. Not everybody's taking it. I will just remind you of the 3 things that screw people up when they are writing their essays. Number 1, try to make it long enough. Get onto that third side of a sheet of paper. You just write a haiku. It's going to be difficult for you to execute all the things that they want. Number 2, do not just restate what they said in the essay. We already know what the author's point is. If I'm the grader, I've read this frickin' article like 100 times. Real quickly, in the intro, maybe give me the stolen thing from the end of the essay, if you remember. This one might have a different essay than the one that you pull from online. But remember, if you go to the end of any of these essays, right here, they give you, they give away her argument. So Eliana Doctorman builds an argument to persuade her audience that, here we go, there are benefits to early exposure of technology. Put that sentence right in your first paragraph to make sure that they know that you know that what the idea is. You don't need to say that much more about it. You're mostly just judging the ethos, pathos, logos, persuasive elements of this. So after you've knocked that out in your first paragraph, don't just sit there and re-quote her and regurgitate her. Instead, you're trying to find as many examples of her persuasive techniques as possible. And that's the third advice, which is just drown them in examples. Every paragraph is basically the same for the body paragraphs. Author does X. Here's 1, 2, 3 examples of her or him doing X. And this is what the effect is on the audience. And then the body paragraph 2, the author does X, 1, 2, 3 examples of the author doing X, then the effect it has on the reader. Just do that. The best essays are the ones that come easily because you spent 15 minutes marking the heck out of this thing and finding as many examples as you can. Remember, scan for capital letters. Those are signs of ethos. Scan for numbers. Those are signs of logos. And scan for inflammatory-ish looking language, abusing it. That's some strong diction there. Unfettered access to the gadget. I guess That's just fancy, fluff words to make themselves sound more intelligent. Heck, if you really want to distract, you could say, by using such advanced esoteric vocabulary, the author seeks to increase their own ethos, proving that what a smart nerd they are. In any case, it's all writing is BS. Just come up with a bunch of examples, show how they are persuasive. But you do need to pull real examples from this. That's the not so subjective part of this. But make sure you got enough of them. If you give them like 10 examples, it's going to be hard for them to give you not a really good score in the analysis category. So just use all your extra time. People finish these essays early. Just carrot into the margins some additional examples that you could have added in each paragraph, just so they're like, okay, we give up. You put 19 examples in here. Fine, you can have a 4. Anyway, I'm not going to say too much more about that, but that's another thing. Guys, great work today. This was a long one. Whether you did this in chunks or all together, great practice. Keep it up. Remember, you can watch the same video again and just skip the explanations and do a different section, and it serves the same purpose. So keep working hard. Remember past, present, future, and turn that into something good for your future. All right, everybody. I will see you next time. Thanks. I hope this is not discriminatory against dyslexics on this problem. In any case, if you look at these numbers carefully, this is 63. It's supposed to be 36. That's too high. That means that C is wrong and D is wrong, because we don't want more salads, which are the more expensive. We would make even more money. We're trying to make less. So if you were able to eliminate A by eyeballing it, you could try 93, or just narrow it down to 93. In order to actually do it, though, probably what we would want to do is just run these new numbers through.